moment when we're first. So I'll ask Nader Ardalan now to approach the podium and continue this conversation. Nader?
Thank you very much, Harvey. It's really a great pleasure to be a part of this team to present just more or less the opening salvos of what we hope will be something that you will find valuable and that you possibly could continue in our discussions. My talk this evening is entitled Time and the Eternal. And I assume that if I do this, it'll say Reflections on Cosmogonic Places. And because this team has had a period of coming to know one another, you'll find that I'm really continuing some of the wonderful presentations that have already been made. But I'm an architect. I want you to know that for 50 years, I have deliberately searched around the world to find a place to design. That is really how I have lived. And now I've had the great pleasure of coming back to my alma mater, and for the last 5 or 6 years, I've been carrying out research about how to build more holistically sustainable places for humanity to live in. So of course this is the general area, and this is that. I also want to tell you that in 2007, I met some friends whom I had known in Boston maybe 25 years ago. And they said to me, Nader, we're organizing to have a first forum, and we're going to call it Architecture, Culture, and Spirituality. Would you be willing to give and send a paper in and pay your own way and to come together to carry on this forum? And we met in a Benedictine abbey, which has now been a habit of ours. We've now held 4 such sessions, and we will hold another one at the Gladstoneberry Benedictine Abbey in Hingham. And these sessions have now allowed this group to grow to be more than 250 people around the world, and we're also a part of the team that's supporting this work that we're doing for the urbanism, spirituality, and well-being. Okay.
That doesn't work either. Just use the arrow on the
No,
on the machine.
this is a setup. I want to look at a particular kind of consciousness, because the world that Davido spoke about, the world that I'm going to address, and principally while he spoke about the city, I'm going to speak about a unit of the city called architecture. And really, I'm not going to call it architecture, but I'm going to deal with place and place making. So this consciousness is a very specific consciousness that somehow we have lost, because we're now in a world of material determinism, which is rather alien to this poem. The old pond, a frog jumps in, the sound of water. Basho, 17th century. The pond, the stillness of the pond, is the eternity of existence. No motion, no time, until the drop that becomes rings that creates time. The center, stillness. The ripples, time. So this is about consciousness of timelessness at the center. And I guess when you think of maybe Rwanji, that might give a sense architectonically, landscape-wise, what this might mean. Can you hear me? Yes? My wife says you can't hear me. I want to go back to Paul Wheatley. Once upon a time, we geographers had this ridiculous argument. Was the first city a market, a storehouse, a temple, or a fort? He challenged that notion, arguing that religious and cultural factors may have been just as important as economics in turning cities into cornerstones of modern society. And then he says this wonderful thing: they were products of cosmomagical thinking. That is, they were the precursors of what create cosmogonic places. That is, that consciousness of that which is above and that which is below are one, and they resonate with one another. So I want to begin with, and I could, you could go and give examples galore. David picked those that might have been more of his heritage. So I'm going to begin with Persepolis. Persepolis is built by Cyrus the Great and begins at 1515 BC. And it is a place that Gershman, with whom I dealt a lot with and drew his archaeological finds, Roman Gershman, the great French archaeologist, Hertzfeld, and then our own dear Dick Fry here at Harvard, felt that this place was the place dedicated to the vernal equinox, the first day of spring, which the Persians have always celebrated as Nowruz, our New Year. And that although magnetic north has shifted over a period of time, there are theories that say that if the sun rising over the Mount of Mercy, which is this mountain behind Persepolis, which originally was not called the Mount of Mercy, it was called the Mount of Mithra. And of course, as you know, Mithra, the god of light. So appropriately enough, as the sun rises above the Mount of Mithra on the vernal equinox and the light passes through this wonderful gate of all nations without casting a shadow, was the marking of the first day of spring. So this is a celebration place of all that empire to come together on the renewal of life. This renewal of life is embodied in all the symbols of this place. So here you have the lion, symbol of the sun, devouring the bull, the symbol of the moon. And what happens at the vernal equinox? The sun begins to become ascendant and night begins to recede. And from this sacrifice, from the blood spilled of this sacrifice, grows this verdant life. I don't have time to go into all this symbolism, but it really deals with these societies that saw the world out there, the world in here, and created an architecture that symbolized this kind of understanding of the order of the universe. I also want to say to you that it's interesting that the symbols also that they use are the lotus and then the cypress. I love this cypress tree. I have to say something about it, although it may take time, and help me keep time, Harvey, but I need about 20 minutes. The cypress tree is one of the few trees in the world that has both male and female within itself. Therefore, it self-replicates independently, and its beauty, therefore, is that it is free and independent. This symbol of the individual being that self-fertilizes itself is highly vital in these civilizations. I go to one that Davido mentioned, which was Mecca, only because I want to deal with the cosmogram of it. And so here at the very center, you see the Kaaba, and of course, Mecca was a pre-Islamic place of worship. I use parenthesis about 2000 because really it is sort of mythic. They say that this is the place that was found when there was the wandering of the tribes of Israel, and that you have the beginnings and the findings of these Zamzam well, and that in any case, this place becomes a place of worship. But on this northeast corner is this meteorite. That is the place where pilgrimage begins, and you go in a counterclockwise moment, and you go through it in a pace of 3 and 4, at a walking pace, at a rapid pace. All these are cosmo diagrams of the universe. And of course, the beauty is that these places are also parts of the geomancy of the world. That is, the ley lines of particular energy centers of the universe. And so Mecca has always been a thing called the navel of the universe and the navel of the world. And this mountains, very sacred to this embellishing, to this containment of the city. And today it has this feeling. Regrettably, I wish to say only the fact that that sacredness of those mountains are now being demolished. And perhaps we might have sometimes in questions to say, what do these things mean? And what does it mean that next to this place of really individual worship rises an 800-meter tower with a sign of Big Ben, and the clock is 40 meters in diameter? Jerusalem, of course, wonderful city. I'm really showing you the cities, in fact, by which I have already carried out and written books on. So at Harvard, we did the Jerusalem studios, and truly, it really is the center of the world, with all of the three Abrahamic faiths, and the Wailing Wall, the Holy Sepulchre, and the Dome of the Rock. Three of the Islamic and the Christian and Judaic places of great value. Karnak, Temple of Amun, 3002 BC, of course, a sacred place on the east side of the Nile River. And the red line, well, it's an axis. People have been building on this axis. So the temple is actually built of many, many parts being built over the years, and would have continued to the right to the temple of Amun-Hotep. But really the reason I say this to you is 1,500 years, 700 years later, comes from this axis, and here are those columns of this incredible place in Karnak. But on the same axis, on the other side of the Nile River, comes the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, the queen of Egypt in this period of time. And so you see how the sacred axis can provoke and move and go into the mountain. And actually, this is a brilliant sense of going back into the earth, into the very earth from which we all are born. So this powerful line, please, let's keep this idea. The spiritual axis is an important axis of what cosmogonic architecture is about. Now we go to another part of the world. My wife and I traveled with His Highness the Aga Khan, ironically enough, in May of 1979, to this beautiful place called Bali. And you know, there is Mount Agun, which is about 3,000 meters above ground. And next to this is really the most holy of the temples, Besaki Temple. And of course, it's all tiered with rice paddies that are terracing up. This is the lifeblood of what keeps people going. And from this rice stalks, etc., is what is built on this hilltop, on this mountaintop temple, the most holy of their temples. And all of these, of course, with the symbolism of numbers associated with them. But the most beautiful thing is that this place is a place of, again, a ritual worship and renewal. And when we were there, it was Eka Gasa Rudra. Every 100 years, this ceremony begins by two pairs of everything, like Noah's Ark, being taken ceremoniously from the ground to the top of the mountain. Why the top of the mountain? Because that is the place of the gods. And then one of these is thrown into the volcano of the great mountain, and the other pair is brought down to the sea and given as offering to the water, where the demon lives. So, gods above, demons below, man, human being, to keep the balance in between. Old ship meeting house. Wow, what a big change, but not really. because people who came to this new world were also looking for that shining city on the hill. They found it in clusters. There was, of course, the Boston Harbor cluster with Beacon Hill. There was the Dorchester cluster, and then there was the Hingham cluster. And here, the oldest existing meeting house church in 1681, a great, great cube with the ontological axis provoking the heavens. But curious enough, as things transform, so here's the interior, and then I'm going to show you the plan of this great wooden interior and the great wooden arches that hold this two-story space. But in plan, it's very interesting. As you know, a Christian place of worship would have principally the altar toward the east, toward the rising sun, toward the rising Christ, which is actually where, I don't know, is there a pointer in this guy? No pointer? Yes, pointer? No pointer. Okay. Anyway, so it should have been here, and it was here. And then around the 18th century,
I did.
I love you. You're always the savior with your life. And so then it moved to here, to the north. And then, of course, if you read this plan, all the society is organized very carefully. The elders are sitting here, yeah? And then the women are here, the men are here, the children are here. And so all society comes to this place, not necessarily as a ecumenical place of ordering, but a social ordering. And so this really now today exists as a wonderful liberal Unitarian church in Hingham, where actually we will also nearby have our ceremonies and our lectures. Oh boy, Mission Church, going fast. So I'm not even going to say any more than just to show you, but because Rancho de TAOS so beautifully then felt in this environment of the great Black Hills, caught by Georgia O'Keeffe. But look at that plan, about 25 feet, 80 feet, almost like a 1-to-3 plan, and then up so gone fast. So Thomas Merton sums up these relatively beautifully. We find ourselves to be most truly human when we are raised to the level of the divine. Thus, in a single act, we accomplish the double movement of entering into ourselves and going out of ourselves, which brings us back to the paradisical state for which we were originally created. Where is this place? It is not a place, it is God. This aspect that of this double movement within the cosmogram, you can also sense your place in the universe. Well, this diagram of death and rebirth, constantly occurring within all of these societies that we might be referring to, almost like breathing in, breathing out, the constant rhythm of life and rebirth. And I'm going to, I guess, have to pretty well quickly close, because I was going to do you a case study about Esfahan, but I'll read the poem and then go through quickly the images. 'Twas a fair orchard full of trees, fruit, vines, and greenery. A Sufi there sat with eyes closed, his head upon his knee, sunk deep in meditation mystical. Why, asked another, dost thou not behold the signs of God, the merciful, displayed around thee, which he bids us to contemplate? The signs, he replied, I hold within. Without is naught but symbols of the signs. Rumi, drawing of the 16th century from our museum. And this really deals with an interesting idea that through all these different places that one travels, I find more and more that there is such kindred sense, that there is a hidden and there is a manifest. There is a micro and there's a macro. And that within this micro and macro, there is this possibility that, fortunately, this diagram has come on and says this. And so it's a very lovely time to stop. Thank you.